The chapter 3, I'm gonna to lead you guys to go through these basic management features or how to manage the device, which are including the initial system login, how to access to the device, the basic web UI display, what you can see or what you can do to configure the firewall through the web UI, and also the basic system management, the configuration file management, how to upgrade the firmware, and finally, how to manage for the license. First of all, let's have a look at the initial system login. So Houston's firewall, as I mentioned, we have the dedicated management port, and also we have the console port. So you can access the device directly or remotely through both command line interface and also web user interface. For the managed protocol, we support console, telnet, SSH, HTTP, and HTTPS. If you want to manage the device through the console, so on the console port, okay, you can install a simulation program in your computer and then set the basic parameter for the console. So the baud rate in Houston is 9600 bit per second. Data bit is 8, stop bit is 1. Okay, after you set the same here, you are able to access to the device through the console port. And if you want to access the device through the Ethernet interface or dedicated management interface, you can, using the network cable, connect to your computer and connect to the management port of the Houston firewall. For some of the low end, the default management port is Ethernet 0/0. And for the middle end and high end models, the dedicated management port is MGT port. The default username and password for the management port is Houston. So this is the default admin login. And the default IP for the management port is 192.168.1.1. This is the login. It is a login to the management port. So you can open the web browser and input this default IP address to access the web user interface. By default, only the HTTPS service or HTTPS protocol is enabled to access to the web user interface. Okay, so the default port I already mentioned before, Ethernet 0/0 or GMT port. This is the default management IP, and both username and password is Houston. And you can also access the device through the command line interface. By default, the SSH protocol is enabled to access through the command line. So you can also access to the management port through SSH. And username password is Houston. Another one access to command line is the console port. It's the console port, as I mentioned before. So you need to set the basic parameter for the console interface. After you successfully logged into the device or log into the system, so first of all, you will see the dashboard. Of the device, okay, which will give you the basic system information and also license status. It will also offer the overall statistics and monitoring for the traffic, applications, and users as well. and also the threads, You can also go to the system page. Okay, go to the system page to check for detailed system information. Which including the hardware model of this device, the uptime, okay, the runtime for the device, the firmware version. This is the firmware version, and also the status of the signature database. Okay, the status of the signature database. And under the network navigation, you are able to configure for the zone, for the interfaces, and also for the virtual switch, virtual router, and some VPN functions. So all the network related functions will be configured under this page. And the object tab, under the object tab, you are able to configure for some specific objects, including the address, the service applications, the users, the roles, and also you need to configure for some security profile for those security functions like AV, IPS, URL filtering, etc. So all those profile for the security functions will be configured under the object. And the policy, under policy tab, you can configure for the policy, for the netting, and also for the QS. And the monitor page, which is used to show you the monitor information or some statistics information, including user monitoring, applications, and also the link monitoring, the QS pipe monitoring, the device status monitoring, etc. So those are all under monitoring page. So let's have a look how to manage the StoneOS system. So by default, as I mentioned, we have the default admin, which is Hillstone. It's the bundled login or bundled account with the default password Hillstone. This is a super admin, has all the privilege assigned. You can change the password of the default admin, but you cannot delete the default admin. Besides of the default admin, you can also create for your own administrator account by assigning to different privileges. We have 4 roles for the administrator privilege: administrator, read-only, operator, and auditor. So the administrator will have the overall permission for all the reading, executing, and writing. It can manage for all the functions, to do the configuration change, to check for all the functions. So this is the administrator role. Second one is the administrator read-only, which will have the permission for reading and execution. You can view all the current or historical configuration informations, but cannot change. And the third one is operator. Operator have the authority over all the functions except change the configuration from administrators, and also no access to check for the log because it's operation purpose. And the last one is the auditor. So the auditor will only have the access to the log information, okay, only for the log auditing, including view, export, and also clear for the log. So this is for the auditor. And you can also create a customized administrator role. As you can see here, those four are predefined. Those four are predefined administrator role. And you can click new to create a user administrator role by assigning different privileges, okay, for both command line and also web UI, both command line and web UI. And you can also do some specific or fine-grained control for the specific functions, After you create for the administrator role, you can go to create a new administrator, by selecting the specific role for this administrator. For example, for this new admins, I assigning the role as administrator. So in this case, this user will have all the access, all the privileges to access the device and do any configuration change. Okay, and then you can also set the username and the password, and you can also control for the login type. For example, if I only allow this administrator to manage the device through the web UI, so you just enable HTTPS, okay, or HTTP for the web UI access. And another important feature is the trusted host. So by default, the firewall device can allow all the users. Okay, as you can see here, by default, we have a default IP range, which is all 0. That means no any control for the IPs. That means anyone can have the access to the device, and then manage the device. Okay, this is the trusted host. In order to manage the system in more serious way, and also keep the security control for the firewall device, we need to specify for an IP range or for a specific IP. So only the IP host in this specific range, they can access to the device. The IP address which is not in the range, they cannot access to the firewall. Okay, so in this case, you'd better to configure for some specific IP range for the IT department or for the specific security team. So only these guys can have the access to the firewall, okay, which we call trusted host. And after you configure for the specific IP range and add to the list, you have to remove the default. Trust host. Okay, and then we can do the specific control for the access to the device. And you can also change for the management interface for their timeout, or also for the port number for the default access. System time is also important. It's quite important in the NG firewall, because there are also some features that relies on the correct system time. For example, the logs. Okay, we must make sure all the recorded logs in accurate time. And also, if you want to do some time-based control, for example, scheduled policy to control the traffic in a specific time period, you also need to make sure the time is correct. So before configuring for all those security functions, first of all, we need to check and make sure the system time is correct. It's correctly set in the firewall. You have multiple options to configure for the system time in firewall. First of all, you can log into the web UI. As you can see from this screenshot, you can log into the web UI. If you connect your local computer to the firewall management port, you can easily click sync time or sync both zone and time button. So in this case, the firewall will automatically sync with your local PC, And second option, you can manually select time zone and date and also the time from the drop-down list to make it accurate. And the third option, if you have the connection to the internet to any of the NTP server, you can enable the NTP and then synchronize the time with the NTP server. So those are the way how to set for correct system time. For the AA server authentication, for the administration authentication, we support both local and third-party AA servers. As you can see here, the administrator authentication, if you create, as I mentioned before, if you create the administrator in firewall directly, so you can use local authentication for the administrators, or we can support Radius and Takas Plus server as the admin authentication, which means we can do authentication for the users from Radius and Takas Plus server. And let's have a look how we manage for the configuration files. As you can see from this page, you can back up all your configurations into the firewall and then restore the configurations by selecting any of the backup files. And you can also export the configuration files to your local computer. And here's the way how to backup. It's quite easy. Just click, start to backup your current configurations. By default, the device can store total 10 copies of the configuration files, which is from startup, and 9 backup files. So backup is from backup 0 to backup 8. So which will be the total 10, will be the total 10 copies. And you can also check for your current configurations in the firewall, and then it's support to be exported. So that is for file management. So totally we can store 10 copies of the configuration files. And how we manage for the upgrading of the firmware. So the device can support to store maximum 2 copies of the firmware image. So when you're trying to upgrade the firmware to a latest version, so we will back up the previous version. Or you can select to back up one of the 2 copies that are already stored in the device. Okay, and you can also switch the firmware between these 2 copies. So this is for firmware upgrading. Okay, so you're able to download the latest firmware from our image website, and then upgrade the image from this page. And also the signature database update for those functions that rely on the signatures matching. such as AV applications, IPS, you need to enable the update for these signatures to make sure you have up-to-date signature database. So the updates support both online update and also local update. So for online update, as long as the device is connected to internet, you can enable the auto update. So the device will curate to the online server during the scheduled time, to ask for the update to the latest database. Here are some two default update server, update 1 and update 2 for the applications signature database update. And you can also find those new update file from our update server and then download to your local PC and upload to the firewall. So that's second option for the offline update. And I also gonna share some information regarding the device booting process. So in this case, you will know how to do the OS upgrading through the booting process. So the firewall startup consists of 3 parts. After you power on the device, so first of all, it will load the bootloader. So bootloader is the one that helps to load the operating system, or you can switch to sysloader. And sysloader is the one that you used to upgrade the StoneOS. You upgrade the StoneOS. And finally, the StoneOS is our operating system. So when the device powered on, so first of all, the bootloader will try to start the StoneOS. Okay. Or you can, as I mentioned, you can manually switch to sysloader. And sysloader, you can use the sysloader to upgrade the OS image via FTP, TFTP, or USB host interface. And you can also use the bootloader to update or upgrade the sysloader through TFTP. So that is the process for the device booting. So how we can restore the device to factory default settings. So before you doing this kind of action, make sure you have backup all your configurations, because this action will erase all the existing configurations. You also have some option to do the factory default reset. So first of all, it's the command line interface. We have the onset all command to reset the device to factory default. And in Web UI, you also have the option. Okay, there is a restore button under System Configuration File Management Backup Restore to restore the device to factory default. And CLR button, which is a hard reset option. For the firewall, we have the CLR button, which is hidden in the pinhole of the device's front panel. This one is used especially when the administrator forget the password of the device. So in this case, you are not able to access to any of the command line or Web UI. So we need to use this hard reset button. Here is the steps. Here's the steps for the hard reset. So first of all, you need to power off the whole device. Okay, power off the device. And then you need to use a pin to press into the CLR button pinhole. And you also need to keep pressing the pin at the same time power on the device. You need to keep pressing it until the status and alarm LED turn consistent red in red color, and then you can release the pin. The system will automatically reboot. So that is the hard reset. So you need to remember how we can reset the device to factory default. Okay, this is the page. Okay, as I mentioned, this is the page in WebUI. How you can restore the device to factory default. And next one will be the license management. I just prepared one table here to list. So the left, as you can see from the left line, those are the available licenses. Okay, all the licenses that are available. And at the top, so the top item, those are the available product lines. Okay, available product lines. So for different products, we may support different functions, or the functions may vary from different product lines. So in this case, you need to understand how many licenses we need, or which kind of functions can be controlled by the different product line. So for the NG firewall, okay, as you can see, basically most of the functions will be supported in the NG firewall, especially the T series. Okay, so this is just for you guys information for the license availability that across all the product line. And after you have the license installed, as I mentioned, from the license page, so we will list all the supported license in the license page. Okay. And also show you the valid time. For each of the license. And how to apply for trial license. So trial license is the one that we used for the POC or for the demo purpose. Normally, as Hillstone partner, you need to send an email to us, okay, to request for trial license. As long as you have any ongoing project that the customer asking for a POC. So here's the steps how to apply for trial license from Hillstone. First of all, you need to log into the device and generate the license request. Generate a license request. Okay. From the system license page, you need to fill with the customer information. And then click generate to get the license requesting string. And then you need to send the license request email to Hillstone regional sales or sales engineer. So the license requesting email should contain the following information. Okay. If you already have this license string, you will not need to offer the SN, the model, because the license string already combines such information. But you need to provide the deal registration ID for the specific project. In this case, we all know this license is used for a specific customer, for a POC, for ongoing project. And also you need to provide the information which kind of license you are asking for. For example, you are asking for platform license. If the customer wants to test all the functions, so just tell us you need full future license. Or if customer only want to test AV or IPS, so let us know you need platform plus AV and IPS. Okay, so that is the license request email. If you don't have this, or if you are not able to access to firewall during the time, you also can provide the device serial number. Okay, we must have the serial number to generate the trial license. And also you need to tell us what is the model the customer are testing. And also the DR ID and which types of license you're asking for. In this case, after we received your email, so we will work on generating the trial license no less, normally we will provide the trial license in the same day as long as we received the license request, or no longer than 2 days. Okay, so make sure you will send the license request email before doing the POC. In this case, we will have the time to prepare for the trial license. After we created or we generated the license, we will send you an email with the license string. So the license will be offered through 2 ways. So one way is in the email, we just copy paste the license string through this table. And you can just copy paste the license into the device and click OK to install. This is a manual input. In some way, we may not give you this table directly. Instead of, providing the license file as a, as an attachment in the email. So you can extract the compressed file and then upload the license file to install the license. You can also install the license if you have the license string offered by us. You can also install the license string in command line using the command executive license install following with the license code. Okay. And after the license successfully installed, you will have the print. And make sure it's better to reboot the device after all license installed to make some of the features take effect. So it's better. We highly recommend it to reboot the device after the license install. So those are the contents that I'm gonna share for this chapter. Here are some important questions. The first one, does Houston Firewall support third-party server as admin authentication server? Yes, I already mentioned before. Let's show you again. So we support for both local and external authentication. Okay, for system management. Yes, it's in here. We support both local and third-party Radius and TACACS Plus. And second one, how many admin roles exist at the device by default? There are four existing admin roles: administrator read-only, operator, and auditor. So question 3, how many configuration files can be stored? There are maximum 10 configuration files can be stored. How to restore device to factory default? I already mentioned before, we have three options. So one, you can use the command onset all to reset the device. Second, in the web UI, under the system configuration file management, there is a restore button. And the last one is the hard reset through the CLR button. What is the difference between trial license and formal license if the license expired? This one I forgot to mention. I'd like to share with you. For the platform license, we have platform trial and we have platform formal license, which is the commercial license the customer purchased. For the trial license, for the platform trial license, for example, if you have 30 days trial license, and the trial time is accumulated based on the real-time power on time of the device. So every day we have 24 hours. So that means for 30 days, you have 24 by 30 hours, for the trial. If you only powered on the device 8 hours per day, so that means you will have 30 days by 3 times, because every day we have 24 hours, right? If you only power on the device for 8 hours, so you will have more trial time, as the platform trial is accumulated based on hours, based on real-time power on. Okay, and the commercial license is different. Commercial license has a fixed date. For example, if a customer purchase 1 year commercial license for platform, so the deadline will be the date after 1 year, the same date, 2022, the same date as today. Okay, so that is for commercial license. And the second difference is the platform trial license. If the platform trial license expired, you cannot do any configuration change. And after the device reboot, all your existing configurations will be erased. That is for platform trial. But for the commercial platform that the customer purchased, even the license expired, the customer can still do any configuration change. The customer can still change the configurations. And after device reboot, the configuration will be still there. So will not be removed. But the customer cannot upgrade to latest firmware version because the platform license expired. If customer want to use the latest firmware, they have to renew the platform license. So that is the key difference between the platform trial and also the platform commercial, the formal license. What is the address of signature update server? So for this signature database, like AV IPS application, the default is update1.hillstonenet.com and update2.hillstonenet.com. How to manage the device via console interface. So you need to connect to the console port of the device and also set the default parameters of the console port. And then you can access to the device using the administrator login. How to enable the access IP of the WAN interface? So for this one, it's easy. You just configure the manage method for the WAN interface. As I mentioned before, you can enable the access through HTTP, HTTPS, SSH, Telnet, etc. So that is the access to enable the access for the specific interface. This is the we can configure for those functions, or where we will see those options through the web UI. So this is the dashboard, as I mentioned before, after you log in to the device. So in this case, I'm using the virtual firewall, okay, which is the VM-based, the Cloud Edge. So the IP address will be different, but as I mentioned, for the hardware-based device, the default IP address will be 192.168.1.1. So that is the default. Okay. And also default access is HTTPS. So after you log into the device, you will see this is the dashboard. From the dashboard, you are able to see the basic system information, the system running time, the platform, the firmware version, and also the version of the signature database, and also the updated time. Okay, and in the right, you can see those are the installed license status. It will show you all the license installed. Okay, and also the valid time of the license. Currently, we are using trial license. And if the device is connected, to the network, we were able to collect and also monitor all these threads, traffic, applications, and the users. But for now, because we just install this as a demo, so we don't have any traffic go through. And for some basic system management, so under the system, there's a system information. As I mentioned, you can check for the system information or through the dashboard. You can check the same. And the device management, we just mentioned before, how to create a new administrator. So this is a default administrator with the privilege to access all the services. And you can create, and we have 4 predefined administrator role. You can create your own role to assign the privilege, either enable or disable, or read only to different functions. And trusted host, as I mentioned, this is a default trusted host. So any IP, as long as you have the connection to the firewall, you can access to the firewall system. So it's better to add for some specific IP for the IT guy or for the security team, to only allow those people can access to the firewall. Management interface, as I mentioned before, you can change for the timeout for any of the access method, and also you can change for the default port. System time is also important, as I mentioned. You must make sure you have the correct system time configured in the device. Okay, you can manually synchronize with your computer, local computer, or you can just select the time zone and date time from the drop-down list. Or you can enable the NTP server to add any NTP server IP to connect to the NTP server to synchronize the system time. Okay. And here's some other configurations. Okay, so all the system that we used in global market, we only have language for English. And you can also set for the password strategy, to enhance the complexity of the administrator password. In this case, to increase the security of the password. And also you have option to reboot the device. And configuration file management, as I mentioned, here you have configuration file list. Okay, you can back up all the configurations. Yes. So from the backup configuration will be from backup 0 to backup 8. So you have total 10 configuration files to be stored in the device, You are also able to check for your current configurations, in the device. And also how to upgrade the firmware. So first of all, you need to download the firmware to your local PC, and then you can select the firmware image to upgrade the system, and then you can select the backup image which need to be backed up, or you can also switch the firmware between those two stored images. And signature database update, as I mentioned, you can enable the auto update for the applications, for the URL. Okay, so update 1.hailstonenet.com and update 2.hailstonenet.com. So that is the default update servers for this signature database. Okay, and license. As I mentioned, you will see all the installed license here. Okay, all the installed license, and it's better to provide this license request string. Okay, to generate the license request string. Okay, after you receive the license, you can manually copy and paste to install the license, or if you received the license file, so you can just upload the license. Okay. So this is basically the system management. Okay. I just lead you guys to go through those web UI configurations. So in this case, you are able to find where you can configure for these functions.